our government policy is completely against what he was saying. And they're a small minority party, which is allowed to exist in terms of our constitution.
But you do allow them to take land.
No.
You do allow them to take land.
Nobody can take land.
And then when they take the land, they kill the white farmer. Look, these are articles over the last few days. Death, 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 horrible death.
That was President Trump lecturing the visiting president of South Africa, claiming that genocide was being carried out against white farmers in the country. Many on the left reacted by calling this an ambush and pushing back against Trump's white genocide claims. Here's late night host Jimmy Kimmel.
There's a right-wing conspiracy theory bubbling right now. It says they're killing all the white people in South Africa. Trump apparently has seen this online, so he brings the president in, he turns the lights down and makes him sit through a multimedia presentation about his own country titled White Genocide.
Kimmel also said this about Trump's understanding of the subject matter.
The guy who couldn't find South Africa on a map of Africa is telling the president of South Africa where it is. There's no genocide against white farmers in South Africa. That evidence Trump presented has been widely debunked.
The Daily Show's Ronnie Chang also blasted Trump for the Oval Office episode. Let's watch that.
Trump is convinced that there is a white genocide going on in South Africa, which of course means there is no white genocide happening in South Africa. It's not even mathematically possible. I mean, you'll never run out of white South Africans when one of them is making 5,000 kids a week. But still.
Oh boy. No, you start us off.
Well,
again.
I have been on the record at this very desk contending that, expressing my vehement disagreement with Trump's position, which has been to block a widespread refugee program and permit white Afrikaners in on the basis of being refugees. I think the evidence of anything remotely approximating white genocide is spurious. Now, this is going to be very serious if I just get back into all the evidence of that again, rather than, Jimmy Kimmel and the guy from the Daily Show were trying to make light of it there. I do think that this is, again, part of a narrative of the president making false or spurious claims. Yeah. There was, for example, one of those documents that he held up purporting to show some form of violence in South Africa was actually from the Democratic Republic of Congo. He made a whole issue about burial sites when the video he was showing was in fact crosses that had been put up to memorialize the dead. They weren't marking graves, they were people marking violence. So it's a topic we've spoken about a lot before. My views on it are pretty clear. I can restate them again, but what do you make of it all?
No, I think right off the bat, there's been a little bit of an eagerness, I think, in American media, and particularly the comedians here in question, to minimize that there's not anything strange and a little bit dangerous going on in South Africa. There, first of all, is not a white genocide occurring. That is coming from Twitter. It's a conspiracy theory. It is going too far. But it is also true to say that the movement to expropriate land from people without compensation and also through violence is really picking up in South Africa, and it could get very dangerous for South Afrikaners there. We're talking about the white population there, 7% roughly of the country. And the tone in the media here, and the Axios had a report on this the other day. They pointed out it's 7% of the population, but reality check, they own 90-something% of the farmland. And I look at that and I go, what's the reality check for? What do you mean reality check? They own this much land, as if to say that there's something that needs to be rectified. And I think that right there you have Julius Malema. He's the guy who's doing the Kill the Boer song. He's the leader of the opposition in that party. He's serious. And he has said very much that revolution is going to require killing, that there will be killing at some point. And this guy's dangerous, and it is right to call that out. But I think when they get out over their skis and start calling it white genocide before it has gotten to that point, it makes their side look foolish.
Yeah, so a couple of things on that. One is that Julius Malema, for example, who's a very, very inflammatory figure, came up because Trump played those remarks in the Oval Office. And to my mind, one of the more tactically or strategically effective moves from the South African side was introducing the Minister for Agriculture, who's not from the same party as Cyril Ramaphosa, and was talking about the fact that he, the Agriculture Minister, had joined with that government in a bid to keep people like Malema out of power. And I thought that that was an effective argument and a powerful argument to be made. Now, I think where you and I would differ, and this is probably just a basic liberal conservative disagreement, is the idea that you implied there is nothing to be rectified in South Africa. The problem is the disproportionate land ownership that white people enjoy in South Africa stems in part from essentially the theft of black land in the 1960s.
I'm aware of the history.
Yeah. And so that in combination with all the many injustices of apartheid means that there is something to rectify. Now, how one rectifies it is a different question. But to assume that the white minority power, political power, should be supplanted by majority rule, and there should be no effort at all to rectify the vast economic disparities, that doesn't make any moral or logical sense to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right broadly. I think that the contention that I want to make is that this could get very ugly. The political factions in South Africa that you just laid out there, there's a hope, I think, in the American mind that this is just going to go in some sort of democratic fashion, that things are going to be rectified the way that we would do things here in the United States. I just worry. I worry that it is not going to go that way, and that there is actually going to be a popular movement behind people like Malema who actually do want to relitigate and go back over apartheid the way that they would like to, which is blood for blood. This does happen, and I worry that the American media and the liberal comedians are not going to have eyes for it if it occurs. And then you're going to be left with Elon Musk and people on X and Grok and all that. They're going to be the only ones saying, there's like mass bloodshed going on over there, but it doesn't fit into the victim narrative of most American liberals.
I think that if Donald Trump or Elon Musk had said what you just said about being worried about figures like Malema, I would be sympathetic to that argument. I would definitely hear that out. And let me be critical of, as it were, my own side in some of this stuff, which is that in general, particularly in the more radical parts of the left, there has been historically, but within my lifetime, a tendency sometimes to romanticize militant leaders and to not grapple with what those leaders have wrought in their own countries. The example that I think is worrisome for people in South Africa is probably the example of Zimbabwe, where Robert Mugabe at one stage was a kind of fashionable figure. Now I'm talking here about maybe the late 1970s or early 1980s, and became a disaster for that country.
Yeah.
I am old enough to remember when the cause of the Sandinistas in Nicaragua was a fashionable left-wing cause. Daniel Ortega, in subsequent decades, went completely off the rails into authoritarian leadership. So I am not, even though I'm in this seat, I'm not blind to the idea that people who espouse radically left-wing or progressive values can come to betray those values. What I am very opposed to is this nonsense, which I'm glad you agree is nonsense, about white genocide in South Africa, or the statement of false facts, or the statement of disproportionate statistics that are untethered from reality sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that when you go that far, you get out over your skis on rhetoric, people will have their ears more closed if something were to go south. And I think I will just wrap up on saying that I agree that rhetoric in the United States and kind of revolutionary factions, more hard left, hard right factions that romanticize the idea of big seismic political change. There is often just this unwillingness to see or acknowledge or maybe just admit that you are often talking about violence. You are talking about that. And I mentioned Malema saying that revolutionary action requires killing. Those are his words. And I think that those people are actually quite clear-eyed about what they're doing. I don't want to derail us by going back to Elias Rodriguez, the shooter here in DC, speaking out for the people of Gaza. But it's that kind of approach to revolutionary action, right? When you are involved in revolutionary movements and you're saying that we're going to pursue these kind of ends, we're talking about violence. And I think a lot of Americans, because they live in a very privileged country where they've not had to see this kind of thing, they're just not willing to recognize it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. We could get into a whole other debate because there are times, I mean, in terms of including the independence of the United States, where military force was used in a valid way to achieve freedom. But I think that in Malema's case, we're talking about a country where apartheid has thankfully been done away with, and he is raising the specter of violence in a way that I agree with you is worrisome at least.
All right. Are young men in America lonelier than everyone else in the Western world? New polling seems to suggest so. We'll be talking about that here next.